The new girl. The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystalline corridors of Nexus Academy, the most prestigious interstellar boarding school in the galaxy. Students from dozens of worlds shuffled to the halls, their chittering, humming, and telepathic whispers creating a symphony of diversity that would have impressed any xenobiologist. Among them walked Zara, a 17-year-old human girl, whose dark hair caught the artificial light streaming through the dome ceiling above. "Great," Zara muttered under her breath, adjusting her standard-issue uniform. Another day in paradise. She'd been at Nexus Academy for exactly 3 weeks, and already she was questioning every decision that had led her here. Her parents, both diplomatic attaches, had thought it would be an incredible opportunity for their daughter to experience galactic culture firsthand. What they hadn't mentioned was that being one of only 12 humans in a school of 3,000 aliens would feel like wearing a neon sign that screamed, "Outsider." The corridors buzzed with the usual morning energy. Crystalline Vorthans clicked their mandibles in animated conversation, while the gaseous nebulans floated past in their containment suits, their forms shifting like living clouds. Zara had grown accustomed to the sight, but she still felt the weight of curious stares following her every move. "Hey, fleshbag." The voice cut through the ambient noise like a plasma blade through silk. Zara's shoulders tensed instinctively. She knew that voice. Everyone at Nexus Academy knew that voice. Kex Vorthal stood near the intersection of 2 corridors, his towering 8-foot frame casting a shadow that seemed to swallow the light around him. His species, the Corthanii, were known throughout the galaxy for their intimidating presence. With skin that looked like polished obsidian and 4 arms that ended in razor-sharp claws, they were natural predators who had evolved in a world where only the strongest survived. "I'm talking to you, human," Kex continued, his voice carrying that distinctive rumble that made even the bravest students step aside. His red eyes gleamed with malicious amusement as he blocked Zara's path to her first class. Zara stopped walking and slowly turned to face him. A small crowd had already begun to gather, students pretending to check their neural tablets while actually recording everything for later broadcasts on the school's underground social networks. "My name is Zara," she said calmly, her voice carrying just enough edge to let him know she wasn't intimidated, though I suppose remembering names might be challenging for someone whose species evolved from carrion feeders. A collective gasp echoed through the corridor. Even the Nebulan's gaseous forms seemed to shiver with anticipation. Nobody talked back to Kex Vorthal, not unless they had a death wish. Kex's 4 arms spread wide, his claws extending with an audible click. "Oh, the little human has jokes," he growled, taking a step closer. "Let me tell you something about my species. Fleshbag. We didn't evolve from carrion feeders. We evolved from apex predators who made carrion out of everything else." "How fascinating," Zara replied, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "And here I thought you'd evolve from failed comedy acts. My mistake." The crowd around them had grown significantly. Students whispered excitedly in dozens of languages, their universal translators working overtime to keep up with the gossip. Some were placing bets on how long the human girl would last before Kex reduced her to a quivering mess. Kex's eyes narrowed to crimson slits. For the past 2 years, he had ruled Nexus Academy through fear and intimidation. Students from across the galaxy cowered before him, and even the faculty seemed reluctant to challenge his behavior. The administration claimed they were working on cultural sensitivity solutions, but everyone knew they were simply afraid of the political implications of disciplining the son of a Corthanii war chief. "You know what?" Kex said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I think you need to learn some respect. Maybe I should teach you about Corthanii culture up close and personal." "Oh, please," Zara said, rolling her eyes. "Spare me the tough guy routine. I've seen scarier things in my lunch tray." The insult hit its mark. Kex's face contorted with rage, and he lunged forward with surprising speed for such a large creature. His claws reached out to grab Zara by the shoulders, intending to shake some fear into the insolent human. What happened next would be talked about in hushed whispers for years to come. Zara moved. It wasn't a big movement. In fact, most of the crowd missed it entirely. She simply stepped to the side, grabbed Kex's leading arm, and used his own momentum to send him crashing into the wall behind her. The sound of 8 feet of alien muscle hitting reinforced titanium echoed through the corridor like a thunder crack. Kex hit the floor hard, his pride bruised more than his body. He scrambled to his feet, roaring in fury and embarrassment. "You little—" "Careful now," Zara interrupted, her voice still maddeningly calm. "You wouldn't want to say something you'd regret. Though I suppose regret requires a functioning brain, so maybe I'm giving you too much credit." The crowd was silent now, every student frozen in disbelief. Nobody had ever seen Kex Vorthal taken down by anyone, let alone a human girl who barely reached his chest. "This isn't over," Kex snarled, his red eyes blazing with humiliation and rage. "Not even close." "Oh, I'm counting on it," Zara replied sweetly. "After all, someone has to teach you that size isn't everything. Consider a public service." As Kex stalked away, his massive form radiating fury, the crowd began to disperse. Students hurried to their classes, their minds racing with what they'd just witnessed. The social networks exploded with footage of the encounter, and within minutes, the entire school was buzzing with the news. Zara Kim, the quiet human girl from Earth, had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Or so everyone thought. What they didn't know was that Zara had been preparing for this moment since her first day at Nexus Academy. While other students had been focusing on their studies or making friends, Zara had been studying her enemy. She'd researched Corthanii physiology, psychology, and combat techniques. She'd learned their weaknesses, their blind spots, and most importantly, their pride. The truth was, Zara Kim wasn't just any human girl. She was a daughter of 2 of Earth's most skilled diplomatic negotiators, people who had spent their careers learning how to read, manipulate, and outmaneuver some of the galaxy's most dangerous political figures. They'd taught their daughter well, perhaps too well. As Zara walked her first class, she allowed herself a small smile. Kex Vorthal thought he was dealing with a typical human teenager. He had no idea that he'd just picked a fight with someone who had been raised from birth to be a weapon wrapped in silk gloves. The next few days passed in a strange calm. Kex seemed to be planning something, gathering his usual circle of followers and whispering in dark corners. The school's social networks were filled with speculation about what the Corthanii bully would do next. Some students had started a betting pool on whether Zara would survive the week. But Zara wasn't worried. She was excited. During her 3rd week at Nexus Academy, she'd made a disturbing discovery. Kex wasn't just a bully. He was a predator. She'd noticed how he targeted the smaller, more vulnerable students. The way he cornered them when they were alone, demanded their lunch credits, and worse. The faculty either didn't know or didn't care, too focused on maintaining diplomatic relations with the various species' homeworlds. Well, Zara thought as she prepared for her next encounter with the alien bully, somebody had to do something about it, and if the adults wouldn't step up, she'd handle it herself. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Zara was walking through the less-traveled sections of the academy when she heard it, a soft whimpering sound coming from one of the storage alcoves. She followed the sound and found exactly what she'd expected. A small Quillen student, no more than 14 years old, was pressed against the wall while Kex loomed over him, 3 of his 4 arms pinning the terrified alien in place. "Please," the Quillen whispered, his feathers ruffling with terror. "I already gave you my credits yesterday. I don't have anything left." "Then you better find something," Kex growled, his free hand caressing his claws. "Because I'm getting hungry, and Quillens always tasted better when they're scared." That last comment was the final straw. Zara had been planning to wait, to choose her moment carefully. But watching this monster terrorize a child half his size activated something primal in her human DNA. "Hey, uglier," she called out, her voice echoing through the storage area. "Pick on someone your own species." Kex turned, his red eyes blazing with anticipation. Well, look what crawled out of the ventilation system. The little human girl who thinks she's tough. The Quillen student took the opportunity to escape, his small form darting past Kex and disappearing into the main corridor. Kex barely noticed, too focused on his primary target. "You know what your problem is?" Zara said, walking closer with deliberate slowness. "You're a coward. You prey on the weak because you know that anyone with actual strength would crush you like the pathetic insect you are. Insect. Kex roared, his voice shaking the walls. I am a Corthanii warrior. My ancestors conquered 17 worlds before your species learned to make fire. Your ancestors? Zara said with a laugh. That's the problem right there. You're living in the past because you know you'll never measure up to what they accomplished. You're just a sad little boy playing dress-up in his daddy's armor. The psychological warfare was working. Kex's breathing had become labored, his massive chest rising and falling with barely contained rage. His claws were fully extended now, gleaming in the artificial light. I am going to enjoy breaking you, he snarled, advancing on Zara with predatory grace. I'm going to tear you apart piece by piece, and then I'm going to broadcast it to the entire school. Let them see what happens when a human forgets her place. Oh, please do, Zara said, her smile widening. I was hoping you'd say that. And that's when Kex Vorthal made his second mistake. He attacked. This time, Zara wasn't content with simply embarrassing him. This time, she was going to teach him a lesson he'd never forget. As Kex lunged forward with all four arms spread wide, Zara's training kicked in. Her parents hadn't just taught her diplomacy. They'd insisted she learn to defend herself in a galaxy full of dangerous creatures. She'd studied under some of Earth's best martial artists, and more importantly, she'd spent countless hours learning about alien anatomy and combat techniques. The first thing she did was target his balance. Corthanii were top-heavy creatures, their massive upper bodies supported by legs that were strong, but not particularly agile. Zara dropped low and swept his legs, sending him stumbling forward. The second thing she did was use his own strength against him. As Kex tried to catch himself, Zara grabbed one of his arms and used his momentum to flip him over her shoulder. For the second time in a week, 8 feet of alien muscle hit the floor with a thunderous crash. But this time, Zara wasn't done. Lesson 1, she said, her voice carrying a dangerous edge as she circled the stunned Corthanii. Never underestimate your opponent. The reckoning. Kex scrambled to his feet, his red eyes now blazing with more than just anger. There was something else there now, uncertainty. For the first time in his life, he was facing an opponent who didn't cower before his size and strength. You got lucky, he snarled, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. That won't happen again. Oh, but it will, Zara replied, her tone conversational despite the violence that had just occurred. You see, that's the thing about bullies like you. You're so used to picking on the weak that you never learn how to actually fight. Kex charged again, this time trying to corner her against the wall. But Zara was ready. She sidestepped his attack and delivered a precise strike to a pressure point on his neck that she'd learned from studying Corthanii anatomy. The alien's entire left side went numb, causing him to stumble and crash into the wall he'd been trying to pin her against. Lesson 2, Zara said, watching as Kex struggled to regain feeling his arm. Know your enemy better than they know themselves. How? Kex gasped, his voice filled with disbelief. How do you know about our pressure points? I told you, Zara said with a shrug. I've been preparing for this moment since I arrived. While you were busy terrorizing children, I was learning everything I could about your species. Your strengths, your weaknesses, your anatomy, your psychology. I know things about Corthanii that you don't even know about yourself. The revelation hit Kex like a physical blow. He'd been so focused on his own superiority that he'd never considered that his prey might be studying him in return. The human girl had turned the tables on him, and he was only now beginning to understand how thoroughly he'd been outmaneuvered. You think you're so smart, he said, his voice shaking with rage and humiliation. But you're still just a human. A weak, pathetic human. Am I? Zara asked, tilting her head with mock curiosity. Then why are you the one on the floor? Kex's roar of fury echoed through the storage area as he launched himself at her with desperate strength. But desperation made him sloppy, and Zara was ready for him. She ducked under his wild swing and delivered a series of quick strikes to his solar plexus, each one precisely calculated to disrupt his breathing, without causing permanent damage. The massive alien doubled over, gasping for air. Zara circled him like a predator, her movements fluid and controlled. You want to know the real difference between us? she said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. You fight with anger. I fight with intelligence. You rely on brute force. I rely on strategy. You're a primitive throwback to a more violent age. I'm evolution in action. Stop, Kex wheezed, his pride finally cracking under the relentless assault on both his body and his ego. Just stop. Oh, but we're just getting started, Zara said, her smile turning predatory. You see, I've been keeping a record of every student you've terrorized, every credit you've stolen, every threat you've made. I've got footage, audio recordings, witness statements. I've built a case against you that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. Kex's red eyes widened with growing horror. You've been watching me, studying you, Zara corrected, like a scientist studies a particularly interesting specimen of parasite. And you know what I discovered? You're not just a bully. You're a criminal. The things you've done to those students, some of them will be considered war crimes on certain worlds. You're lying, Kex said, but his voice lacked conviction. Deep down, he knew she was telling the truth. Am I? Zara pulled out her neural tablet and began scrolling through files. Let's see. There's the incident with the Quillen student I just interrupted. That's extortion and assault. Then there's what you did to the Zephyrian girl last month. That's sexual harassment and intimidation. Oh, and let's not forget the time you cornered 3 Andromedan freshmen and threatened to space them if they didn't give you their project answers. That's terrorism. Each accusation hit Kex like a physical blow. He'd been so careful to avoid the faculty, to choose his victims wisely, to make sure there were no witnesses. But somehow, this human girl had documented everything. What do you want? He whispered, his voice barely audible. Now that's the right question, Zara said, her tone becoming almost friendly. I want you to understand something very important. You picked the wrong human to mess with. You see, my parents didn't just teach me diplomacy. They taught me how to destroy someone's life using nothing but words and evidence. She crouched down next to the fallen alien, her voice dropping to a whisper. I could end you right now. One transmission to the school authorities, another to the Galactic Council, and you'd be expelled, arrested, and probably executed depending on which jurisdiction handles your case. Your father's political career would be over. Your entire family would be disgraced. Kex's breathing became shallow and rapid. He'd never considered the political implications of his actions. In his arrogance, he'd assumed his father's position would protect him from any consequences. But, Zara continued, I'm not going to do that. Not yet. Why? Kex asked, hope flickering in his red eyes. Because I want to give you a choice, Zara said, standing up and looking down at him with something that might have been pity. You can continue being the monster you've always been, in which case I'll destroy your life so thoroughly that future generations will use your name as a cautionary tale. Or you can change. Change, Kex repeated, as if the word was foreign to him. Become better, Zara explained. Use your size and strength to protect the weak instead of preying on them. Become the warrior your ancestors will be proud of instead of the coward you become. Kex stared at her for a long moment, his mind racing. The human girl had given him something no one else ever had, a choice. He could continue down the path of destruction, or he could try to become something better. And if I refuse, he asked, then I'll show you what a real apex predator looks like, Zara said, her smile never wavering. You think you're at the top of the food chain? You're not even close. Humans didn't conquer half the galaxy through size and strength. We did it through intelligence, adaptability, and the absolute refusal to quit. You're big and scary, but I'm something much more dangerous. What's that? Kex asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. I'm a human with a plan, Zara said simply, and my plan involves making sure that no other student at this school ever has to fear you again. The weight of her words settled over Kex like a physical presence. He'd spent his entire life believing that might made right, that the strong naturally dominated the weak. But this human girl had shown him a different kind of strength, one that didn't rely on claws and teeth and intimidation. Kex began and stopped. The words were harder to say than he'd expected. I don't know how to be anything else. Then learn, Zara said, extending her hand to help him up. "I'll even help you, if you're serious about changing." Keck stared at her outstretched hand as if it were a venomous snake. No one had ever offered to help him before. His entire life had been about dominance and submission, predator and prey. The concept of cooperation was as foreign to him as breathing underwater. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you help me after what I've done?" "Because," Zara said with a slight smile, "that's what humans do. We see potential in everyone, even in monsters like you. We believe that people can change, that they can become better than they were. It's what makes us dangerous to our enemies and valuable to our friends." Slowly, hesitantly, Kex reached out and took her hand. The moment their skin touched, something fundamental shifted in the dynamic between them. The predator-prey relationship that had defined their interactions was gone, replaced by something neither of them had expected: possibility. "I have conditions," Zara said as she helped him to his feet. "First, you apologize to every student you've wronged, publicly. Second, you use your influence to protect the smaller students instead of terrorizing them. Third, you submit to regular evaluations to make sure you're keeping your word." "And if I fail?" Kex asked. "Then I release everything I have on you," Zara said matter-of-factly. "Your choice, redemption or destruction. But choose quickly, because my patience has limits." Kex was quiet for a long moment, his mind wrestling with concepts that challenged everything he'd been taught about strength and power. Finally, he nodded slowly. "I'll try," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Good," Zara said, her smile becoming genuinely warm for the first time. "Because I'd hate to have to destroy you. It would be such a waste of potential." As they walked back toward the main corridor together, Kex couldn't help but marvel at the strange turn his life had taken. 3 hours ago, he'd been the undisputed ruler of Nexus Academy, feared by all and respected by none. Now, he was following a human girl who was half his size but twice as dangerous, hoping to learn how to become something better than a monster. "Can I ask you something?" Kex said as they walked. "Sure," Zara replied. "How did you know? About the pressure points, the anatomy, all of it?" Zara's laugh was soft and genuine. "My parents always told me that knowledge is the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. When I arrived here and saw what you were doing to the other students, I decided to prove them right. And the fighting skills? Earth has a saying," Zara said with a grin. "Speak softly and carry a big stick. The diplomacy was my soft voice. The martial arts training was my big stick." They reached the main corridor, where students immediately began to stare and whisper. The sight of Kex Vorthal walking peacefully beside Zara Kim was unprecedented, and the school's social networks exploded with speculation. "Are you ready for this?" Zara asked, noting the attention they were receiving. Kex straightened his shoulders and nodded. "I think so. Where do we start?" "With the Quillan student you were threatening," Zara said. "His name is Pip, and he's been having nightmares about you for weeks. I think a sincere apology might help him sleep better." As they walked toward the dormitory section, Kex felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could become something more than a monster. Maybe this strange human girl could teach him how to be the warrior his ancestors would be proud of. Behind them, the corridors of Nexus Academy buzzed with whispered conversations and excited speculation. The story of how Zara Kim had taken down the school's most feared bully would become legend, told and retold by students for years to come. But the real story, the one that mattered most, was just beginning. It was a story of redemption, of second chances, and of the incredible power of hope to transform even the most unlikely of monsters into something better. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing in the galaxy isn't the biggest predator or the sharpest claws. Sometimes, it's a small human girl with a big heart and an even bigger plan. And Kex Vorthal was about to learn that lesson the hard way.